whispers in the void. They don't speak its name. Not in the halls of power. Not in the training rooms of elite navies. Not even in the back alley ports where smugglers trade rumors. Because it doesn't have one. It never needed one. There are only whispers. Only shadows. Only the space where the story used to be before it was buried. They say it was a ship. A warship. So advanced, so powerful, so utterly human, that the galaxy had no choice but to pretend it never existed. It did not break the rules. It broke the idea of rules. No fleet ever destroyed it. No enemy ever defeated it. No one ever boarded it. And after its first and only appearance, it simply vanished. But the fear remained. Even now, centuries later, you'll find quiet warnings carved into stone on the oldest colony worlds. If you see the silent star, run. Children learn about it as legend. Officers learn to dismiss it as myth. But the admirals, the ones who have seen too much, they know it wasn't a myth. It was real, and it was human. The galaxy has rules, written, revised, and sealed by the great civilizations that came before us. War is allowed, but only within limits. No planet-wide extinctions. No temporal interference. No planet-killing weapons. Balance must be maintained. Those rules worked for thousands of years, until we arrived. Earth was small, backwater, primitive, but humanity had a strange way of looking at things. We didn't build to match what already existed. We built what shouldn't exist. And then, we built something worse. A ship, not for conquest, not for defense, but for deterrence. A ship that did not follow the rules, because it was never built for the galaxy. It was built for humanity. And humanity does not forget fear. The records of its construction are gone. Its blueprints erased. Even its name is missing from military databases. But traces remain. In dark corners. In fragmented logs. In the memories of those who survived its presence. They say it never fired a weapon. It never needed to. It simply appeared. And the galaxy trembled. One sighting. One moment. And everything changed. A galactic ban was passed days later. Not on humans. Not on Earth. But on the ship. By name? No. It was called only one thing. The anomaly. And the law was clear. If ever seen again, it must not be approached. It must not be provoked. It must not be acknowledged. No one asked why. Because everyone already knew. The Treaty of Thorns. Long before Earth joined the wider galaxy. It was already peace. Fragile. Conditional. But peace. It had taken 1,000 years to achieve. 3,000 wars. 16 species lost forever. And one star that still burned green. Poisoned by weapons no one speaks of. Out of all that chaos, the elder species forged a pact. A great galactic agreement. A code written not in law, but in memory. They called it the Treaty of Thorns. Because every power in the galaxy had been wounded. Every species had bled. And every one of them feared what might come next. The treaty said, we may strike but not destroy. We may fight but never erase. We may defend but never unmake. It was not a treaty of peace. It was a treaty of fear. And it held barely. Fleets were limited. Weapons restricted. Artificial intelligences strictly monitored. Everything balanced, just enough to survive. And then humanity came. Earth was admitted slowly, cautiously. No one expected much. We were too young, too loud, too scattered. But we adapted. Not because we were wise. Not because we were kind. Because we were curious. We learned the rules. We followed the forms. We signed the treaties. But we asked questions no one else had asked in centuries. What if something broke the code? What if peace couldn't hold? What if someone didn't play fair? The other species dismissed these questions. They thought they came from fear. But humans don't ask because they're afraid. They ask because they plan. Somewhere deep in Earth's defense command, a secret council formed, not of politicians, not of generals, but of architects, thinkers, philosophers, the ones who imagined the worst and built something for it. They believed the Treaty of Thorns wouldn't last, not forever, because nothing that fragile ever does. So they prepared, not with armies, not with numbers, but with one answer, one deterrent, one message, shaped into steel and silence. It would not break the treaty. but it would exist just outside its reach. A shadow behind a curtain. A myth wrapped in reality. A warship not built to fight wars, but to end them before they could begin. And its name? No one remembers, because it was never spoken. Not once. Only designed. Only launched. Only witnessed. Project Silent Star. The official name was meaningless. Deep Defense Construct, Prototype 01. Buried in layers of bureaucratic code. Hidden beneath orbital logistics reports and terraforming budgets. But within a small circle. A circle so tight it barely existed. It had another name. Project Silent Star. It didn't begin in a lab. It began with a question. What if we had only one chance? What if the next threat didn't come with diplomacy? What if it came suddenly, without warning? A weapon so vast the galaxy couldn't react? How do you stop something like that? You don't match it. You don't race it. You build something so unimaginable, so incomprehensible, that even the idea of challenging it would bring hesitation. That was the goal. Not to build a ship, to build a pause. A moment of fear that could stop a war before it started. Silent Star had no command crew, no bridge, no admirals. It had no need for any of them. Instead, it had a core, a living core. Not alive in the way we are. Not artificial either. Something else. A hybrid mind, built from neural templates of Earth's greatest minds. Philosophers, strategists, artists, not just warriors. It wasn't designed to think like a human. It was designed to understand them, to know when to act, when not to, when to wait. And it waited. Years passed. The hull was built in secret, orbiting a dead moon in a forgotten system. Each plate of armor etched with microscopic ridges. Not for defense, but for memory. It could store ideas, shapes, histories. Not a ship, a statement. No one who worked on it spoke of it afterward. Most disappeared, retired early, moved to quiet places. Some were offered permanent silence. Not as punishment, as protection, because the galaxy could never know what had been made. Even Earth's leadership didn't fully understand it. They only knew this. If the stars ever turned hostile, if the Treaty of Thorns ever burned, then Silent Star would rise. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. But even its creators feared it, because they didn't know what it would become. A guardian? A curse? Or something in between. So they gave it no name. Only a mission. Never fire first. Never retreat. Never speak. And then they let it sleep. Alone. In the dark. Waiting. The day the stars went quiet. It happened on a Tuesday. Galactic Standard, 1402. Routine patrol. 3 fleets. 71 ships. A border skirmish on the edge of Sector 17. Nothing unusual. The Tsar Dominion had been pushing into neutral territory, testing boundaries. Their ships were fast, heavily armored, confident. The Galactic Council sent a response force. Standard protocol. Sent enough firepower to impress. Not enough to escalate. But something was different that day. Something no one could explain. A signal was received. Encrypted, anonymous, untraceable. 1 line of data. No coordinates. No identification. Just 5 words. Do not fire. We see. Commanders dismissed it. A prank. Noise. They continued their advance. 17 minutes later, the stars changed. It wasn't dramatic. No flash. No explosion. Just a ship. There. Where nothing had been. No entry signature. No warp trail. No gravitational ripple. It simply was. The fleet captains couldn't describe it. Every sensor failed. Every visual feed blurred. They said it was like trying to look at an idea that hadn't finished forming. It didn't broadcast. It didn't move. It just hovered. Silent. Still. And somehow, watching. Within 2 minutes, half the fleet powered down weapons. Not from command. From instinct. The rest followed seconds later. As our ships stopped moving. Frozen in place. And then came the moment. That would become legend. Not a sound. Not a blast. But a wave. Not of energy. But of thought. Hundreds of crew members later described the same sensation. A presence inside their minds. Not hostile. Not curious. Just present. It showed them images. Not of war. Not of death. But of consequence. Burning skies. Planets cracked open. Civilizations erased by the weight of fear. Not a threat, a memory, not of what would happen, but of what had already happened. Somewhere, long ago, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the ship was gone. No jump signature, no trace, just absence and silence. The fleets returned to base. Without orders, without discussion. No shots had been fired, no damage taken. But every commander filed the same report. We were not ready, and it knew. From that day forward, the border remained untouched. No one tested it again. Not because they feared war, because they feared the pause. That had held them all, in absolute stillness. Because that pause had a shape, a presence, and perhaps a will. The tribunal that never spoke. The galaxy did not take silence lightly. Not from its fleets, not from its enemies, and certainly not from its allies. The moment the incident report reached the Central Council, panic bloomed, not from what was seen, but from what was not. No energy signatures, no comms logs, no visual proof, just identical testimony from 3 separate fleets, representing 6 different species. They had all seen the same thing, and none of them could explain it. So the council acted. They convened the tribunal. 12 voices, 12 systems. The highest authority in interstellar law. The last time it had been called was to sentence the extinction architects of the Second Galactic Purge. This time, there was no enemy, no battle, no war, just a ship. And so the tribunal met. But something strange happened. They never spoke. They gathered in the crystal chamber, a room older than any living species. Walls that remembered every decision ever made. The chamber waits for words. It is built to record, to echo the will of the galaxy. But on that day, no one spoke. Not because they were uncertain, not because of fear, but because every member of the tribunal had felt the presence. Not directly, not during the incident, but in their dreams, in their thoughts. Each had seen the same shape. Each had heard the same silence. A silence that felt, not empty, but full. Not a void, but a choice. And none of them were willing to challenge it. Officially, the meeting lasted 17 minutes. No transcripts, no rulings. When the doors opened, the members walked out, with pale faces and tired eyes. Some resigned the same day. Others disappeared into quiet exile. One, Archon Vel of the Zachari Accord, simply walked into the deserts of her home world and was never seen again. No statements were given, but a single directive was issued. One line, added to the Treaty of Thorns in a language older than the stars. The constructive soul origin is not to be engaged, named, tracked, or spoken of. It was the only time in galactic history a ban was placed, not on a weapon, not on a species, but on a memory. And no one questioned it, because somewhere, deep down, they all understood. Some things are not meant to be judged, only remembered, quietly, carefully, at a distance. The whispering worlds. There are places in the galaxy where the stars feel closer, where the air holds a strange stillness, even in the vacuum of space. These are the whispering worlds, planets that were once alive with noise, trade routes, diplomatic centers, colonies filled with stories. Now they're quiet, not abandoned, not ruined, just subdued, not by war, not by time, but by memory, because these were the places that saw it, the ones that glimpsed the silent shape, the human warship that wasn't supposed to exist. And afterward, nothing was ever the same. On the mining moon of Calexis Prime, entire shifts of workers stood motionless for 7 minutes. Machines kept running. Lights stayed green, but the workers stopped. Every single one, at the exact same time. When questioned later, they gave no answers. Just 4 words. It looked at us. No one could explain what it was. None of them remembered anything clearly. Only that, for a moment, they felt completely seen, not as individuals, but as a species. And then it was gone. In the floating temples of Vaeltar, the priests who had sung the same hymn for 3,000 years suddenly fell silent. Their hands trembled, their eyes filled with tears. The High Cantor, who had never spoken outside ritual, uttered a single phrase. The echo has a source. The temples were closed the next day, not by order, by choice. Pilgrims still come. They kneel at the gates. Unsure why, but they leave changed, quieter, heavier, as if they carry something new inside them. The governors of these worlds made no announcements, no alerts, no calls for assistance. Instead, they enacted what came to be known as the Quiet Protocol. Lights dimmed earlier, communications shortened. The usual festivals were held without music, and no one spoke of the Warship, not because they were forbidden, but because they couldn't. Every attempt to explain it felt like trying to hold water in your hands. It slipped through, lost shape. It wasn't just the ship's presence that lingered. It was the feeling it left behind, as if the galaxy itself had been judged, not with anger, not with pity, but with deep, wordless understanding. Ships that passed near those systems reported unusual sensor anomalies, gravity shifts too small to be dangerous, but enough to make the hulls hum. Veteran captains began to avoid those sectors, not out of fear, but out of respect. The maps were quietly redrawn. Routes curved gently away, and still, the worlds whispered to each other, to the stars, perhaps to the ship itself, because somewhere out there, it was still watching, not waiting to strike, not sleeping, just waiting, and the worlds that remembered would never be the same. The ban. It wasn't called a negotiation. It wasn't called a meeting. The galaxy didn't even pretend this time. They summoned humanity, not with threats, not with formality, but with quiet urgency. A sealed communique. No words, just a location, a time, and a symbol, one that hadn't been used since the founding of the Galactic Compact. Earth responded, late as usual, deliberate as always. A single ship was sent. No escort, no armaments, no posturing, just a diplomat. An old one, blind in one eye, voice like sand, carrying nothing but a worn briefcase, and a reputation for silence. The other species brought fleets, bodyguards, advisors, but Earth brought only him. And when he entered the council chamber, he didn't speak. He just sat, waited, and the galaxy spoke first. They didn't ask for an explanation. They didn't demand an apology. They made one request, one only: dismantle the ship. No arguments were made, no evidence shown. Everyone knew what they meant. The construct, the anomaly, the warship that turned fleets to silence and leaders to ghosts. Earth's representative nodded once, opened his briefcase. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank. He set on the table, turned it slowly, then left. No signature, no agreement, just silence. And the galaxy understood. Days passed, then weeks. Surveillance probes reported no movement. The anomaly did not reappear. Earth made no announcement, but a whisper spread through the back channels of power, across encrypted streams, and between trusted hands. The ship had not been dismantled. It had been moved. No one knew where. No records showed its departure. But deep space telescopes recorded a gap, a sudden absence, where gravitational fields once danced unnaturally. And in its place, nothing. No debris, no signature, just nothing. The Galactic Compact held an emergency session, but no decisions were made, because no one dared push Earth further. For all their diplomacy, their clumsy politics, and their reputation for chaos, Earth had built something the galaxy couldn't unsee, and now they refused to unbuild it. So the Council passed the ban, quietly, privately. Not a law, not a treaty, just a rule everyone agreed to follow. The anomaly will not be named. Its creators will not be challenged. Its path will not be tracked. Its return will not be spoken of. It wasn't about obedience. It wasn't even about fear. It was about balance. And for now, the galaxy was willing to pretend the balance had been restored, even if everyone knew it hadn't. Not really, because the ship still existed, and Earth was still silent. The warship's watch. They say it didn't go far. The warship, the anomaly, whatever name it never had. Some say it was hidden beneath the surface of Saturn's smallest moon, locked in ice older than light. Others believe it entered a fold in space. Not a jump, not a warp, just a slip, like a breath between thoughts. A few whisper that it never left at all, that it watches still, not from the stars, but from places deeper, places between dimensions. between particles, between moments, where time waits to be asked for permission. No one can prove any of it, but everyone believes something, because belief is safer than doubt. On Earth, the project was sealed, files erased, teams disbanded, research buried in oceans of false data. The few who had built it were gone. Some passed peacefully, some disappeared without trace. No monuments were raised, no medals given, only silence. But in orbit, certain satellites tilt slightly once a year. Their movement doesn't match any weather pattern, any solar event, just a small rotation, always at the same hour, always facing the same direction, toward nothing, as if saying, "We remember." The ship itself never responded. It never sent a signal, never showed itself again. But ships that venture too far into deep sectors, the ones charted as quiet zones, the ones marked in red on the unspoken maps, sometimes return with strange readings. A spike in pressure with no source. A brief flash on screens, like a reflection with no object to cast it. Crews report chills. Compasses fail. The air feels thicker. Some say they hear a low hum, felt more in the bones than in the ears. They don't see anything, but they turn back. Always, without knowing why. In the silence, the ship watches. Not actively, not mechanically, like a monument watches, like a scar watches. Waiting not for an enemy, but for a question. A moment when the galaxy forgets its caution. When someone gets too bold, too loud, too dangerous. Then, maybe it will return. Not to fight, not to conquer, just to remind. Because the warship was never meant to wage war. It was meant to hold it, to carry the weight of what could be, and make sure the rest of the galaxy never had to see it, unless it had to. The fear that lingers. It's been over a century. No sightings, no transmissions, no movement. The warship, if it still exists, remains quiet. But the galaxy has not forgotten, because fear doesn't need reminders. It only needs memory, and this memory lingers. Naval academies across the stars still teach the same tactics, still simulate the same battles. But in the classified archives, the ones without names or access codes, there's a different module, one not spoken of, never shown to cadets. It's simply titled Protocol Anomaly. Those who read it say it contains no diagrams, no images, no technical specs, just testimony, statements from officers who were there, engineers who helped build the impossible, diplomats who stood in the room when the galaxy asked Earth to dismantle a god. One line is repeated across the pages. We felt seen, entirely, and we did not like it. In some species, the memory became folklore. Among the Vairati, children are told to behave, or the silent star will blink. Among the Jorawan, a morning chant includes a single long note, held in silence, meant to honor those who faced it and lived. On the outpost world of Bryn 7, pilots walk backward 3 steps before launching into deep space. When asked why, they say, in case it's watching. It's never named, but it's always felt. The galaxy moves on. New alliances form. Old wars flicker, fade, but the fear remains. Not the fear of death. The galaxy has known that forever. This fear is different, quieter, more honest. It's the fear of being judged by something that doesn't need to speak, to be understood. The fear of facing something so advanced that even your best weapons feel like toys. The fear of knowing that if it comes again, there will be no warning, no conversation, no second chance, just presence and silence and the choice to stand down or disappear. Humans, of course, say nothing. When asked directly, their ambassadors smile politely, offer no comment, change the subject. Their military advisors pretend not to know. Their scientists say it's all myth. But every once in a while, you'll catch a glance, a brief look between Earth's older officers. Not fear, not denial, just a quiet acknowledgement that somewhere, something still waits. And if it wakes, the galaxy will remember what true silence sounds like. A return no one wants. It began the way these things always do, with a signal, not a broadcast, not a warning, a flicker, a ripple, so small it slipped past hundreds of sensors, lost among cosmic noise. except one caught it. An old relay station in a forgotten belt, automated and obsolete, a place that hadn't mattered in decades. It registered a fluctuation, deep, low, steady, a pattern so faint it could have been a natural echo. But it wasn't, because buried inside that pulse was a timing sequence, a countdown. It wasn't addressed to anyone, no origin point, no return frequency, but it was recognized. Old hands were called in, retired officers, analysts with faded clearances. And when they saw it, they didn't speak, they didn't move. One of them simply closed her eyes and said, "It's thinking again." Within hours, Earth sealed its outer observatories. Diplomatic channels went quiet. All long-range human vessels were ordered home. No public announcement, no visible change, just a shift, like the stillness before a storm. Across the galaxy, sensors began to glitch. Tiny tremors in space, anomalies near black holes, gravitational fields that fluttered, then returned to normal. Worlds that had once whispered fell silent again, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, as if even the planets remembered what was coming. No one knows what triggered it. Some say the galaxy got too comfortable, that the balance held too long, that someone built something they shouldn't have. Others say it was time, that the ship was never asleep, just watching, waiting for the moment when its presence will mean something again. It hasn't appeared, not yet, but the signal continues. Faint, unchanging, a soft reminder in the dark, is still here, and somewhere, whether beneath ice, beyond space, or folded between moments. The most overpowered human warship ever built is waking up, not to fight, not to speak, but to be seen. And no one, not even Earth, knows what it will do next, because it was never made for war. It was made for a single purpose, to stop everything. If it comes again, the galaxy won't try to fight, because this time, they understand. Some returns are not welcomed. They are endured.